Welcome to the World of Rare Disease, a show that focuses on awareness and education about rare and complex disorders. I'm Lisa Deck, and I'm a Rare New England committee member. I am your host for today's show. Today our show features Tasia Rachiski. From the outside, Tasia looks like the average 27-year-old, but in reality, she lives with a rare, chronic, but for the most part, invisible illness. Today we are going to hear about Tasia's rare disease experience and learn more about VLCAD. We're thrilled to have you here today, Tasia. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So we're going to dive right in. Can you tell us what VLCAD is and what this disease, how it impacts your life?
Right, yeah. VLCAD stands for very long chain acyl-CoA dehydrogenase deficiency, quite a mouthful. It is a genetic metabolic disorder. It's an autosomal recessive disorder. So I had 1 in 25 or 1 in 4 chance, 25% chance of getting this disease, and I did. My body is unable to break down stored fat. It doesn't have the proper amount of enzymes to do that first part of the process of breaking down fat. So essentially, my body is running on less energy than the average person. Because of that, it causes from day-to-day symptoms such as fatigue, muscle breakdown, which is also called rhabdomyolysis, and it can cause, if prolonged, if the symptoms are prolonged, can cause other organ and other issues with the body, kidneys and liver especially.
Right. Okay, and when were you diagnosed and how long have you been living with this disease?
Yes, I was diagnosed at a young age, 4 months old. I went into a metabolic crisis, and through a prolonged process, eventually genetic testing was done, and it was discovered that I did in fact have VLCAD, inherited from my parents.
Right. So you have lived with this since 4 months,
Yes.
And I'm sure there's been ebbs and flows in your life. So can we talk a little bit about what have some of your biggest challenges been living with this rare disease?
Yes, absolutely. I would say one of the most challenging times living with this disorder was definitely during adolescence. It was a time when my symptoms really kind of took a shift. During childhood, I was relatively symptom-free. I had to take medication and take certain precautions, avoid fasting and things like that. But other than that, it didn't really affect my day-to-day. It wasn't until my adolescence, teenage years, around age 12, that I started to experience the symptoms again. So really, I was having muscle breakdown and rhabdomyolysis kind of like very frequently. I had always been a very active person. I played many sports, and it was becoming harder and harder to do so. So trying to kind of make both that physical adjustment and adjust kind of the way I was living my life, as well as the emotional impacts and the social impacts of being a teenager with a rare disease, was really tough. So I think it was overcoming that time in my life where I was kind of starting to understand that, this wasn't just kind of something that I had and it was there, but actually it was something that I actively had to manage every day and kind of build into my life.
Well, thank you everyone who was joining. I'm going to turn this over to Lisa for a few minutes. That was just a little brief teaser about the stuff that Rare New England is doing. So Lisa, I'm going to allow you to either share your video, share your mic, and kind of give a brief introduction to things.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound good.
Okay, great. So I am Lisa Deck, and I am a representative of Rare New England, and I am thrilled to be here today. I'm going to just take a couple minutes to introduce myself and then talk to you a bit about the world of rare disease. Jeff, one quick question. I had sent you guys the video to play. Do you have that, or will I play it on my screen?
Let me see if I can find it here real quick and I can play it.
Okay, and when I'm done, but yeah, I think I sent it on a video. I mean, not a video, I'm sorry, an email. So, but let me continue. So Rare New England, we have a recording library that is free. It's a free resource for everyone to use. And it can be accessed on the Rare New England YouTube channel. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how this came about and tell you what you might find on our channel. So again, my name is Lisa Deck. I am officially a committee member, and I've been a volunteer with Rare New England for about 2 years. Personally, I'm a rare disease patient and multiple stroke survivor. I have loved being a volunteer in many capacities for the past 2 decades for many groups. Yet 5 years ago, I suffered a 4th stroke and was diagnosed with Moya-Moya disease. This is a rare disease, and because of that, I soon became a rare disease advocate. I had 2 major brain surgeries and a long recovery, but here I am today. I have a long history of working on legislative advocacy, public speaking, blogging, and nonprofit organizations. Rare New England is an organization based right here in my town of North Attleboro in Massachusetts. The mission of Rare New England is to bring together New England patients, families, and providers touched by rare and complex disorders. Rare New England offers educational opportunities, creates awareness of available resources, and builds foundations to support and improve the quality of life for patients and their families. In Rare New England, I have found a wonderful place as a host and a producer of a monthly show series called The World of Rare Disease. I also work on legislative advocacy and speak at conferences and hearings for Rare New England. Today, though, I am here to introduce you to this show. We also call it T-Word, The World of Rare Disease. We produce this monthly cable show about rare and complex disorders. T-Word has robust programming that offers information, education, and resources to all stakeholders and those living and working in the rare disease community. The show started 2 years ago in September of 2018. It's a collaboration with a local cable channel called Mansfield Cable Channel. The founder of Rare New England, Julie Gertzy, was asked to be a show guest. They also filmed a couple PSAs. And in discussing it with the staff at Mansfield Cable, they decided that a show about rare diseases was needed. The original idea was to have various guests and have various people from Rare New England host these shows. However, I soon quickly got the call to be the host, and I have been in that role ever since. The show brings together a variety of experts to discuss a wide range of subjects relating to rare and complex healthcare issues. Examples of our past guests, which all are included in our recording library, includes patients, rare disease parents, organizations, medical professionals, resource organizations like Team Impact and Inspire, pharma and biotechnology reps, regional and national organizations, government agencies, and many more. Most guests film 2 shows, and we have a very thorough process to make sure that the guest is comfortable on our show. The audience is robust. There's many people that can benefit from this. But I would like to ask, as you're watching, you might be asking, what can I do to get involved? We are always looking for guests. We're looking for the idea of guest, and if you have an idea, please send it to us so we can share that resource with others. Now that COVID has come upon us, the cable channel has not been able to accommodate guests. So we have a new way of doing it. We have been filming our shows on Zoom, and then we have been having our guests be a panel member on a Facebook Live. So we have Facebook Lives. We've been having them once a month, and we would love for you to tune in and be a part of that. You can promote the show, tell people about it. Like I said, we've had some amazing guests, and the information and resources that they're sharing truly can help others. So have a look. We would love if you have a group that might want to see a show, the World of Rare Disease show, and have a filming and maybe even have question and answer session. We'd be happy to do that with you as well. We love having people be part of our team, help with marketing. We have another program as part of this called Rare New England in Motion. And this is a segment at the end of each show where we will answer questions sent in by viewers. So if you're watching a show and you have a question, send us a message. We'd love to talk to you. And finally, we are very thankful to have Ultragenics as a sponsor for the World of Rare Disease, but we are always looking for more sponsors. So As you can see, we have great content. We have this recording library here to share. Go to YouTube and it's Rare New England RNE, and you can find all of the different episodes. As I said, we have 36 episodes currently, and we are scheduled for the next couple months. So we're very excited about what we have to share. Today, thanks to the Rare Fair, thank you for having us. And mind you, they were a guest on our show just last month. But we want to show you an episode of our show. This episode is entitled The Workforce Shortage in Genetics, and it features a Rare New England board member, Dr. Mark Corson. Dr. Corson is a pediatrician and metabolic geneticist. He talks in the show about the shortage of geneticists overall. This lack harms patients and puts more pressure on other doctors without the necessary training. Jeff, are you able to find that video, or I can play it on my screen?
I believe I have it.
Excellent. And if you have any questions or want to know more about this, we encourage you to reach out to Rare New England. They have a website, rarenewengland.org, or you can reach out to me, Lisa Deck. I am, let's see, I think it's ldeck@rarenewengland.org. And we can even put this underneath the information. So we are so thankful to the Rare Fair for letting us screen this, and look forward to talking more on Thursday. Thank you.
Welcome to the World of Rare Disease, a show that focuses on awareness and education about rare and complex disorders. My name is Lisa Deck, and I am a Rare New England committee member and your host for today's show. Today our show features Dr. Mark Corson, who is a founding board member at Rare New England. He is a pediatrician and metabolic geneticist. He works as director of the Physician Support Service and director of education at VMP Genetics. He is also co-founder and co-director of the North American Metabolic Academy. We are thrilled to have Dr. Corson here today to share his experience and knowledge with us. Today's show will focus on the increased need for more geneticists and how this lack of geneticists really harms patients and causes a burden to other doctors. Our target market for this show is medical professionals and trainees. Welcome to the show, Dr. Corson.
Thank you.
We're thrilled to have you here today.
Pleasure to be here.
Can you tell us about the role of a geneticist in patient care?
All right. So genetics is really the study of inherited disorders, right? And at one time in the old days, these disorders sort of fell into two categories. One is the patients who have unusual physical features, say some syndrome, trisomy 18, or Down syndrome. And a clinical geneticist would see those patients. And then there were those patients who had biochemical abnormalities, some chemical disturbance where there's too much of one substance, too little of another. And the biochemical or metabolic geneticists would see them. And actually, there was rarely any overlap between the two. We respected the dysmorphologists, and the dysmorphologists respected us. But we never, one did one did. We had our separate clinics. As genetics has developed, genetics really permeates almost all aspects of medicine. One, it's no longer just patients who have unusual physical features, but they have a myriad of different symptoms that have a common cause. And so the dysmorphologist has now evolved to become the clinical geneticist. And biochemical geneticists still see patients who have chemical abnormalities, but sometimes the chemical abnormalities are not quite obvious as the old ones used to be. And sure enough, some biochemical genetic syndromes are associated with unusual physical features. So now there's no longer a distinct division between the areas of genetics, and each one, especially the older of us, are sort of horrified that there's this blending. but truly, genetics is sort of much wider and is not quite as separated as it used to be. Plus the fact that now we recognize, of course, that there are certain types of cancers that are associated with a genetic basis. And so some families are at risk for having cancers because of some, again, alteration in the genes. pregnant women are now routinely screened for genetic disorders in advance to see if they carry a higher risk. How we metabolize drugs depends on our genes. So whether a drug is effective or it could be actually dangerous to us is now available. So genetics is a pretty pervasive factor in every aspect of medicine.
Right. When I think of genetics, I think it's something you can't see. It's kind of invisible. And it's interesting to hear you say how much it touches. I mean, I've never thought of the differences. That's just my layman's terms. But what are some current trends with today's geneticists and genetics? You mentioned what's going on, but how does that kind of show in our society now?
Right. Well, genetics was always an academic medical practice. So that where would you find the genetic clinics, the metabolic clinics? You'd find them at big teaching hospitals. You wouldn't find them at community hospitals. You wouldn't even find them in smaller academic medical centers. But unfortunately, the science of genetics, so the diagnostic capabilities, the availability of treatments, those have expanded. But the number of geneticists, or the number of clinicians to actually address the clinical need has not kept pace. And so what you have is the number of geneticists over here, and the patient population keeps rising. And so you have more and more patients that are dependent on a group of providers that's just not expanding rapidly enough.
Right.
And so unfortunately, the genetic societies have not developed an adequate plan for increasing their numbers. So what you're seeing now is different types of clinical practices evolving. For example, telemedicine. So remote patient care, where you have a clinician at a medical center and either patients at home or with their provider at a much smaller center or doctor's office. And so that's good because it increases access. Or in my situation at VMP Genetics, we're actually pioneering the concept of physician support. Mm-hmm. So we have contracts with physician practices or hospitals where there are no biochemical geneticists, or there's one, or there aren't enough to satisfy the clinical need. So we are plugging holes and filling deficiencies. So as long as there's somebody on site, a physician who will see that patient, we can provide the expert backup either in acute situations or scheduled situations so that those patients can gain access wherever they are. In other situations, there are genetic counseling services where if you have a DNA result, then you can consult with a genetic counselor, again, long distance, either over the phone or visually, I guess, through Skype or alternative format, and you can get assistance with understanding what those genetic results mean.
Right. And how does this impact, I guess, in both ways, the before and the after, how does it impact patients? So when there's the deficit, how does that impact patients? And then now as you're finding ways, how does that impact patients?
Well, so the problem is, of course, access. Is if you don't have enough experts in the field, then how are patients to find out about what they have themselves if they have a group of symptoms and there's a genetic cause? How are they going to find out an answer? And if they don't have a diagnosis, how are they going to find out what is going to happen to them in the future? Like, what is their prognosis? How are families or couples going to find out whether, if they do have a diagnosis, either of them, is there a risk to their children? And because you would make reproductive decisions using that information. Do you want to create a family, using biologically, or are you going to adopt? And then, of course, if you don't have a diagnosis, you can't access therapy. And there are a lot of innovative therapies that are being developed or are in the pipeline right now. But without a diagnosis, you can't get access to them. So access is a big deal. So that's the problem with a workforce shortage.
Right. And how does a workforce shortage affect other doctors, other physicians?
So what happens is, typically, sometimes other physicians have enough expertise or enough experience that they can play some of a role in diagnosis and management. But because teaching about genetics and metabolic disease is not good, in medical schools or in postgraduate medical training programs, they cannot pick up that slack. And so they can't fill enough of a role, or they're put in a difficult position of trying to play a role that they're not outfitted for.
Right.
And so that's a problem. One example is that many genetic tests are now ordered by primary care physicians. The problem is those primary care physicians or certain other specialists too who are ordering these tests don't understand the complexity of what they're ordering, and they don't understand the complexity or full ramifications of the results that come back. And as a result, the patients are getting inaccurate information from them, or sometimes, frankly, wrong information. And that's a bad situation.
Right.
And that's, the commercial labs are offering these tests, and so on the surface it makes sense. But it only makes sense if the whole process, including the understanding of the interpretations and the counseling, are accurate.
Right. So that trend, so what can be done about this? I mean, it seems obvious that there are more and more genetic disorders. There's a growing society. There's not as many professionals. So where do we stand? What can be done?
Well, I think it really falls to the genetic societies, the professional societies, to make a concerted effort to figure out how to recruit young professionals into this area of medicine, and also how to make incentives that bring people into this area of medicine. And that's a bit of the problem. And, on the one hand, medical students are very savvy these days, and they want a good long-term lifestyle. But if there are not enough people in this area of medicine, then it sort of shows as, well, this is a hard area to be in. So we have to create incentives, and so we have to work with the societies to do that.
Right. It's interesting because I remember a couple years back, being in DC and hearing about the whole genome sequence. And I mean, it seems like it's cutting edge, and I would think that some people would be thrilled to get into that and understand it. But I guess with so many different, choices you have coming out of medical school, or, there's so many, but it does seem like it's cutting edge, and really, things are going to be changing in our lifetimes in this place. I know that Rare New England hosts some career fairs, and can you talk a little bit about that and what that brings to people who might be interested in being a geneticist?
Sure. So Rare New England is an interesting organization because it is a patient advocacy organization, but it also focuses to some extent on the health professionals and providers, either through education or other issues that are important to them. And because the philosophy is, if you make the provider situation better, then the patients benefit as well. So last year, Rare New England hosted 2 career fairs for genetics. These occurred at Boston Medical Center and Massachusetts General Hospital in the Boston area. And we brought in a clinical geneticist, a biochemical geneticist, and a geneticist who who talks about research, genetics from a research perspective, because some people really, that's why they go into this area of medicine. And then we advertised this and had a good number of medical students, postdoctoral students, so that were not in medicine, and some interns or residents who came in to consider genetics as a career choice. So over dinner, because food brings people in always,
of course,
they listened to a day in the life of a geneticist, but just as important, what drives their passion to stay in this area? how has their genetic careers impacted their lives and their souls? And that was stuff I hadn't heard before. And it was personal and it was compelling. And we think that this should be done around the country. And it should be done not just once, it should be done regularly. And really provide students and trainees the opportunity of knowing that this area, that there is a career option here. For example, I bring patients into biochemistry courses at Tufts and Boston University medical schools. And I show them that biochemistry is not just a science. There is a clinical application. Metabolic genetics is the direct clinical application of biochemistry. So you show me a chemical pathway, and I'll introduce you to someone who lives with a defect in that pathway. And I can't tell you how many times afterwards students have come up to me and said, I like biochemistry, but I never thought there was a clinical relevance to it. I mean, an obvious one. And that's my area of medicine. So I think it's exciting for students to know what their options are.
Right. I think it's neat because it's a unique way, too. It's kind of a unique way to have see a day in the life of what you could go to and see what exists.
Right.
And yeah, it's a great idea. I know I actually sat in on one, and I was also so impressed kind of to not only hear the practical application, but why they do it and what drives them.
Yes.
And it goes back to patient stories. It drives them. They want to help people, and this is a way to do it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our thought about the workforce shortage in geneticists. Do you have any final words to share with me? I have one question.
Yes.
How do you talk to me about your career? I mean, this is how your career has led to being a geneticist, and what satisfaction does that bring you?
Right. Well, so I came into medicine with the idea of being a pediatrician. And so there I was in Toronto in my second year of pediatrics, evaluating this little girl who had a gastrointestinal condition, and she was in hospital with that because it was a chronic condition. And one day she looked like she was getting sick, like with some sort of an infection. And when we did her blood testing, it showed that she had a metabolic acidosis, so her blood acid level was high. So the first thing you think about in that kind of a situation is, it could be an infection. So there I am writing out orders for a blood culture and a urine culture to consider this infection. And I'm writing out the orders for antibiotics, and I'm thinking, well, wait, if this isn't an infection, I don't have a plan for what to do. So we had elective periods, times that you can focus in and study things of particular interest. So I came to Children's Hospital in Boston to spend a month on learning about causes of metabolic acidosis. And I ended up working with the metabolism team there. And I was really impressed by the team because it's a multidisciplinary area of medicine. So I loved that month, and I figured, okay, you know what? On my role, on my journey to become a neonatologist, so a pediatrician focusing on newborn medicine, I think I'm going to do a year of genetics and metabolism because it'll benefit me in whatever I do. And I came back to do a year, and then I ended up finishing the training in genetics and metabolism, and that was 3 years. And then 3 years became 30 years, and I never left Boston. So it's patients change your lives. I mean, whether it's a live patient case or it's a patient you see, or it's a research project about an interesting patient case or some novel discovery you find, be open to having patients change your life and run with it.
So is this one patient who kind of propelled you into this field?
Exactly right.
And now you're giving back. It's excellent. Well, thank you very much for being here. It's really been excellent to listen to you.
Thank you for having me.
So before closing, we provide our viewers with an opportunity to share comments or ask questions from our prior shows. Rear New England in Motion is the perfect way to expand upon our mission of engaging and educating our community. Feel free to send us your questions or comments after the show. It can be sent to the email address on the screen. We will share your responses on our next show. From our last show, we received a question from a patient who wants to share her story but isn't really sure how. So Rare New England is always accepting patient stories to be considered for speaking and other opportunities. And as Dr. Corson said, you can also contact that specific disease organization and they may have opportunities for you as well. We hope that you can do that. Feel free to reach out to us for more information. Thank you and for your willingness to help. And thank you again, Dr. Corson, for being here. Thank you for watching. And remember, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, and then think zebras. Thank you.
All right, Lisa, it looks like there were some chats. It looks like you've been responding back to those chats. Does anyone else have any questions real quick for Lisa about the Rare New England?
I might just chime in. I gave the wrong email address for myself. It's actually lisa@rarenewengland.org. So if you'd like to reach out, I would love to talk to anybody.
Okay, well, very quickly, Rare New England, there will be a spotlight showcase for all 3 days of the Rare Fair during this time, where there will be an episode air. Please tune in and watch. If you have any questions for Lisa, you know how to get a hold of her. Lisa, thank you again. It was awesome.
You're welcome. My pleasure. And thank you for hosting this awesome event.